Itch it up, my selector.
Of content. Parental discretion is advised.
I know you're gonna dig this.
And now for our feature presentation.
Cuéntame, mi negro.
The first topic I want to get into is this topic of white privilege. The word white privilege has been thrown around the past little while in a number of contexts in our society, but specifically here in boxing, we've been hearing the term being used. It came up a couple weeks ago in an interview that Chris Mannix had with none other than Paulie Malignaggi. I kind of want to get into that. I want to listen to that for a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about it in the context of Wilder and Fury and what happened last year, last February, 2 Februarys ago in their fight. And I just think that the whole term has kind of been misused a little bit. It's a little bit misunderstood. It's being used in a way that's not entirely appropriate. And then I'm going to get into this whole coon calling, because it seems like if you're black, like me, and you want to criticize anyone who's black who maybe does something you don't agree with, in this case me and Deontay Wilder, you're labeled a coon. I've thrown up some videos. People have called me a coon for saying what I've said on my channel, on D-Style's channel, I see G-Funky, what up G-Funky, on his channel. And I want to get into that too, because, you disagree with somebody, disagree with someone. You want to call them a name, call them an appropriate name, but we're going to get into that one too. So look, I said I was going to start here by talking a bit about this interview Chris Mannix did with Paulie Malignaggi. I'm going to play it and then we'll get into it a little bit. So let me bring that one up for you guys, and we'll get into it and we'll talk about it. Here we go.
I want to just ask you about, for several years, you were the top analyst over at Showtime doing their boxing broadcasts. That ended for you last summer, in part because of comments you made to IFL TV about the end of the African-American fighter. People can look them up if they want to. I mean, as you look back on that now, almost a year later, any regrets about how that all played out?
What I regret is probably the way it was interpreted. I don't think it was meant as in the way many people interpreted it. I'm not going to regret or apologize for what I feel. That's for sure. When I say something, it's because I mean it. But I think things can be interpreted in certain ways. I do think people that are racists tend to see race in every single thing somebody says. And so unfortunately, I think it was made more racial than it actually was, by people that are probably racist against people of my skin tone, of my race.
All right, so I just want to stop it right there. I don't have the original video. I believe IFL TV took the video down. I don't exactly know exactly what Paulie said. It sounds like what he was saying is that not all white people are privileged, and not all black people are privileged, unprivileged, or in kind of a bad situation society-wise. I don't quite know what he said, but it was interpreted as him saying that black people don't face any kind of adversity. And, if that's what he said, then that's definitely wrong. So I just want to say that. But if what he said was that not all white people are privileged, then, an argument can be made in supporting that. Paulie is Sicilian. It wasn't too long ago where Sicilians were not even considered white people. That's kind of changed recently. But I don't fully understand the context of exactly what he was saying. So let's keep listening.
So I think that's probably how I'm going to break it down for you. I don't think it was interpreted in the way it was meant to be interpreted. I do think things happen to everyone. I don't think you can paint every circumstance with one certain brush. You can't say all black people are oppressed. You can't say all white people are privileged. You can't say things like that. You can't paint everybody of a certain ethnicity or color with the same brush because then that's racism in itself, right? So I do think you do have to approach things circumstantially and listen to people's stories circumstantially, and you'll find that there are things that we stereotype as a society that probably shouldn't be stereotyped. Like, I may have said I don't feel like African Americans are oppressed in this day and age as a race, but at the same time in this country, so there are people that get offended by that, and then there.
All right, so let's stop it there. It sounds like he said that he doesn't feel that African Americans are oppressed in this day and age. Well, Paulie, I do have to disagree with that 100%. The majority of African Americans do not find themselves in the 1%. And therefore, the majority of African Americans are oppressed working class people. Now, not everyone in the 1% is white. But the majority of people, at least in this country, in the 1% are white. So you got to really kind of watch your words when you're saying what you're saying. Now, look, Paulie's not coming from the perspective of someone whose descendants came over here on the Mayflower and exterminated Native Americans and had slaves. I get that. He's someone who's a first-generation immigrant. He's from Brooklyn, New York. His family is from Sicily, which even in Italy, a lot of Sicilians face racism, especially from Northerners who honestly don't consider them to be white. And at the end of the day, if a Norwegian person and a Sicilian person are both white, then you really got to ask yourself how useful the term white is, just in terms of explaining things that oftentimes need to be looked at in a little bit more detail. But some of what Paulie said is okay, but his big problem here, where I think he stepped on a landmine, was saying that black people in this country are not oppressed. And at the end of the day, that's a very problematic thing to say. Not all black people are oppressed, of course. I don't think you could say that Michael Jordan right now is being oppressed, or that the billionaire owner of BET or former owner of BET or any black business person that hires a bunch of other people, especially his own people, and exploits them and pays them, minimum wage or less, you can argue that that person is oppressed. But the fact is, like I said before, the majority of black people in this country are working class people that, occupy the 99%. And you really shouldn't be making those kind of statements. Now, that's what I think about Paulie. I think he probably should have issued an apology. He probably would still have a job if he did. He should really watch his words. But I think that one thing that he said is true. And one thing that he said that is true is that in every context, not everybody is oppressed. It's not every context where I, as a black person, am oppressed. And at the end of the day, we all have certain privileges: men versus women versus men, black versus white, gay versus straight. You could go on and on and on. But I really think it's problematic when people really start to discuss the suffering of other groups of people. I once had had discussions with black women where they tell me, "Oh, the most oppressed woman or person in the world is the black woman," and this is in the context of the United States. And I would say, well, black women are very oppressed, but if you look at it from the perspective of a black man is more likely to be killed. And I'm not saying this hasn't happened to women, it has, but a black man is much more likely to be targeted for fatal violence by the police. I don't think that we can necessarily say that in every context someone is more privileged than somebody else. It goes by situation to situation and depends on what people are saying. But look, the black community, Tracy said it is right, is that historically the black community has been oppressed, especially in this side of the world, in the Western Hemisphere, in Brazil, in Cuba, in Haiti, in Venezuela, Colombia, the United States, you name it. If we come from this continent and we look like me, we came here as slaves. If you came here before the 20th century, and that's where you kind of trace your ancestry. And by definition, that is an oppressed group. But let's transition here real quick to Deontay Wilder. Now, look, he comes from an oppressed group. He comes from the descendants of slaves. That goes without saying. Black people in this country have faced all kinds of oppression up to now, all types of systemic racism up to now, the denial of grants, of loans, the school to prison pipeline, the lack of infrastructure development in communities. It could go on and on and on. But here's the thing. What does that have to do with getting your ass beat by Tyson Fury in Las Vegas? Absolutely nothing. There was no cheating that can be proved. There was no spiking of the water by your trainer. That can't be proved. And guess what? Your trainer's a black man. You didn't have any problem oppressing him and throwing him under the bus. You were his employer. You were paying his salary. You were his boss, and you decided from a position of power to essentially take an enormous dump on the man, shit on his legacy, accuse him of engaging in a felonious act that would merit prison time if it were true. You besmirched him, you smeared him, right? You engaged in essentially the sullying of the man's name on a big scale, all because you feel that the stacks were against you as it related to this fight, and that Tyson Fury, I guess, used his white privilege, right, to influence the result of the fight, to get the commissioners on his side, to allow loaded gloves, to allow the gloves to be placed in the wrong position, to have egg weights in the glove, I can't even remember all of the stuff that he said. It was so crazy, so much of it. I mean, it started out with the suit and then just spiraled downhill like a big ball of snow collecting more snow as it, rolls down the top of a mountain during an avalanche. It was really, really bad. Now, look, what he has done is he's used the legacy of oppression, the legacy of white supremacy, the legacy of systemic racism against black people in this country to justify a loss that had nothing to do with any of that. Now, I say that as a black person, and what happens is, there's a segment of the YouTube boxing community that will label me a sellout, that will call me a coon and all different kinds of names. And it is what it is. You want to call me that stuff for speaking my mind, that's fine. You want to call Andre Ward those names for speaking his mind, that's fine. You want to call Tim Bradley those names for speaking his mind, his opinion on these things, that's fine. But you know what happens is this. There are a lot of people in this country who find themselves in very bad situations financially and otherwise, right? Groups of people with light skin tones who, guess what? Didn't own slaves and immigrated way after slavery ended, or were even around while slavery occurred, but didn't participate in that because in the 19th century, they weren't part of that 1% that owned slaves. And when you continuously blame white people for problems like this, what happens is people get tired of hearing it. And then when you actually have something to say about black people getting shot that are innocent, about people not getting jobs that they deserve because of their skin color, because people not getting home loans or all kinds of other things because of their skin color, those people will just tune you out and they don't want to hear it. Because unfortunately, there's oftentimes discussions like this, like Wilder has had and like his fanboys have, that totally discredit the struggles of our forefathers, people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X in this country, or like Nelson Mandela on the other side of the world. Because if you label everything as the result of white supremacy, if you label everything as the result of racism, you get to a certain point where people who honestly don't know the nuances of these things and honestly don't know any better will start to say, oh, here we go again. Oh, I don't want to hear this. Or here we go again with that other stuff. And I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. And yes, this does exist in Mexico too, where there is a lot of racial discrimination. I'm starting to see the comments come in. racism is a problem in a lot of countries. It is, absolutely. But I couldn't think of a more fair playing field in two guys. Let's forget about the weight disparities between them, because that was a huge deal. With gloves on, duking it out for the heavyweight championship of the world. That's the most fair playing field you're going to have. And I'm sorry, but the decks were not stacked against Deontay Wilder. If you listen to Fury's fans, again, Fury comes from an oppressed community. Look into it. Look at the history of the gypsies in Europe. Look at the history of the Irish traveler community in the United Kingdom. He also has had the deck stacked against them. He was fighting on enemy soil when he came over here and fought in Los Angeles and got the draw the first time. And his fans thought that it was U.S. bias. You could make a claim that, oftentimes in boxing, the home side gets the win. But it didn't go to the extent as what we saw and what we heard from Deontay Wilder after the second fight. And like I said, it is dangerous because what this does more than anything, and, I don't hide my politics. I'm for the 99%. I'm for people that sell their labor. I'm not for people that buy their labor, that buy people's labor. I'm a proud member of the 99%. I have more in common with my fellow working men and women of all colors than I do with the oligarchy, the plutocrats, the bourgeoisie, the people that buy other people's labor and make them suffer. So, this is all intended to divide us as working people. And unfortunately, for clicks, all right, for an excuse, for a justification, Deontay Wilder has tapped into that identity, racial-based politics that is so prevalent here in our society right now to justify a loss, to explain away the fact that he got beat by Tyson Fury. And that is not good. That is something, again, that's very dangerous. Our society is already divided enough. Working class men and women of all colors are divided as it is. Boxing is a venue where we should be coming together and enjoying a sport, enjoying a fair playing field between two men or women that put their hand wraps on, that put their gloves on, and go to battle one-on-one. And my view is that we got to take all of this stuff out of the narrative. We got to take all of this stuff out of the analysis. And we got to really just do what my man G Funky does, who's in the chat with us right now. And that's Chicano Prophet as well, and many others. And that is just focus on what's happening in between the four corners of the ring. The tactics, the strategy, the give and take, the ebb and flows, the power, the skill, the defense, the offense. That's what I'd like to focus on, right? Not arguments where you're saying that a guy who came from halfway around the world, a gypsy, came here and used his white privilege to walk away with a win. And then, like I said, what ends up happening is, unfortunately, people like me, people like H Money, people like Andre Ward and Tim Bradley get labeled a coon for expressing our views and not co-signing what we consider to be bullshit. Now, look, a lot of you may not be familiar with the word coon or what that means or the historical kind of significance of that. So I'm just going to share this right here so you guys can quickly have a look and we'll discuss.
A is for Auntie, the oldest there all. She rocks all us children to sleep. A is for Auntie, the oldest there all. She rocks all us children to sleep in her shawl. D is for Daniel, who tends to the door. He took care of Massa way back for the war. F is for Felix, who won't do no work. He's lazy and shiftless and ready to shirk. Z is for Zonia, chunky and small. But here come the missus, so I guess just them all.
Listen, Mammy, there ain't no way to wash clothes. What you all need is rhythm. What do you all mean, rhythm? I'll show you what I mean.
So what you were seeing there essentially are negative depictions of black people, coons. Okay, the big lips, the wide eyes. All right, it's often associated with blackface. It's often really what it means is a black person acting the fool for the entertainment of white people, for the white ruling class, for the slave-owning black or the slave-owning white or the white person in the big house that's hired the cook and the gardener and the cleaner and everything else. What that has to do with me saying that Deontay Wilder did not lose a fight because of white privilege, somebody's got to make that connection for me, because it really doesn't make much sense to me at all. Now, I wasn't the only person, all right, who felt that this was BS. You know, I played a bit of that earlier on this week, and I'm going to share some of it again for those of you who missed it. All right, Andre Ward, Tim Bradley, they did a tremendous job of explaining away the bullshit. And like I said, we'll throw this up. All right, I'm going to share it, and then we'll quickly get right into it. Here we go.
Well, it's tough to know the reasons with Deontay Wilder because he didn't meet with the main media. He did some YouTube interviews with mostly reporters who are sycophants and acolytes and getting it on his terms. He made an opening statement. He spoke briefly with you afterwards, but a lot of finger pointing at Deontay Wilder coming off of this press conference because of not wanting to engage when he has spent the better course of the year, Dre, talking nonstop, making claims, having conspiracy theories, making accusations that Tyson Fury cheated, have loaded gloves, pointing fingers at his own corner, firing Mark Breland, saying he was acting as a double agent. The list of excuses, the list of claims goes on and on and on. And then he didn't speak about any of them the other day when he would have been asked about them.
Well, everything you just named in terms of,
So before we get right into Andre Ward speaking his piece, I'm just going to say what I said earlier. White privilege ain't the reason Tyson Fury beat Deontay Wilder. Loaded gloves are not the reason. Mark Breland's spiking water was not a reason. Egg weights, you name the excuse, was not the reason. He said all of this stuff. He showed up to the press conference. He kept the headphones on. He didn't say anything. He wouldn't answer any questions. And it honestly took guys like Andre Ward and Tim Bradley, two black men, two boxing analysts. Maybe you disagree with them sometimes. Maybe you agree with them most of the time. I tend to agree with them a lot of the times. Obviously, there's sometimes where I disagree with them on the boxing stuff that they see inside the four corners. But when it comes to what they're about to say right now, I agree with it 100%. So let's have a listen.
the character of Wilder and how he's, presented himself in the sport is not just the last couple of years. That's how he's always been. So when you see him sort of tuning out the world and trying to tune out Tyson Fury, it's a major red flag because it looks like he's hiding. It looks like he's struggling to deal with the pressure in the moment. And of course, we all know, and Fury said it, that Wilder's always a punch away from upsetting the apple cart and winning a fight. But we're not talking about that. Wilder has called himself a king, and heavy is the head that wears the crown. You have to deal with these moments. There's a time and a place to be home and get away for 2, 3 months, 6 months. It's been 18 months. You got to be able to face this moment. Your trainer, Malik Scott, is getting involved in arguments and taking the bait from Fury as if he's the one that's going to fight in July, and he's not. And then you got the fighter who's tuning out the rest of the world. You have to face that. You have to shoulder it, because here's the thing. Come July 24th, those headphones are coming off, and you got to feel the arena. You got to face the pressure, and you got to hear the crowd, and you got to face Tyson Fury. And my question is, are you mentally and psychologically ready for that? Look, I know.
Well, before we get into Bradley, look at that. I agree with everything he said. He's going to have to face the music. He's going to have to, back up all of the stuff that he was saying, but he's going to have to back it up in the ring. All right. He's going to have to really bring it. And it's time for the excuses to stop. And I saw a guy very articulately laying out a logical argument, making a logical statement about what he saw. I didn't see a coon. I didn't see anybody acting the Sambo, putting out the big eyes. All right. And shooking and jiving and buck dancing for the white master. I didn't see any of that. And we're not going to see it from Tim Bradley either.
What it's like to come into a press conference with headsets on and glasses, because I did it, Deontay Wilder. I did it. And try to tune out the world. That's what I was trying to do. And the problem with that is that the truth will come to the forefront. And it always does. You have to attack the truth all the time, here on out. But at the end of the day, Tess, I lost that rematch because of the headphones, because I tried to tune out, everything around me, because I didn't want to hear what anybody had to say. And that's a foul in Deontay Wilder. That's a foul. That's a huge foul. And I believe that's going to come back and haunt him in the ring.
Bernardo, you were there. What was your takeaway?
That the mindset is the same as.
Well, he was right 100%. I made a joke last time I showed this video about, Bernardo Osuna having to teach Deontay Wilder to be a man. Somebody said, oh, well, you should make fun of. I wasn't actually trying to make fun of Bernardo Osuna. I was essentially saying that, things are really bad for you when you got a boxing interviewer telling the heavyweight champion how to man up and stand for what he said, how to man up and not make excuses, how to man up and not accusing your trainer, a fellow black man that you threw under the bus, of spiking your water and poisoning you and removing your legs prior to the fight. That's what I was saying. I mean, I'm not saying the brother here is not a man, but it's very interesting to me that a guy who puts on a suit and tie and gets in front of a camera and asks fighters questions is having to school the heavyweight champion or former heavyweight champion, still heavyweight champion in the eyes of his fans, about how to be a man and stand up for what the fuck you said. Something that he still cannot do. All right. It's one thing to say all this outlandish shit that he said, but then after he says it, my man, stand up for what the fuck you said. He had the opportunity to confront Tyson Fury to his face. You kept the headphones on. You didn't say anything. And then during the stare down, you just backed up and walked away. Not a very good sign. Not a very good sign. So, I'm gonna quickly advance it through, and we're gonna get right back to over to my man Andre Ward. In fact, I think I went way too far. Sorry about that. Let's bring it up right to around here.
Oh, that the only person you can't lie to is yourself.
Yeah.
And when he said, I want to have the same mindset, I want to be mean, I want to do that, that worries me because it didn't work the last time. The first time it barely worked after that Undertaker get up by Tyson Fury. So you've been in there for all these rounds and it hasn't worked except for just tiny moments. To me, he's got to change. He's got to really listen to Malik and change his boxing style, because what he's done so far worked to get him here against everybody else except Tyson Fury.
I think Wilder, to your point, Bernardo,
See, now look, they didn't attack really what he said, because I don't really think they want to get into the politics of it, the nitty gritty of race relations. And what I would say is really what's happening and what's always happened is class warfare in our society. And, it's being presented as the white guy versus the black guy when doesn't really need to be presented that way. It's being presented as the man that has all of this privilege and used the privilege to control the commission and get the buck dancing, disloyal trainer. If you listen to some of his fans on my comments, some of them have been deleted or whatnot, but in Mark Breland to do his dirty work and spike the water. Look, that's not what happened, but let's listen to Andre Ward again.
I think Wilder could have put himself in a better position going into this third fight to not just have a puncher's chance. If he faced some of the criticism and faced what he did, he knows what he did right and what he did wrong in training camp. and not take the route that he's taken. You know, we as analysts and broadcasters, and I'll just speak for myself, I'll be the first person to call out a fighter if something was done illegally. But what I'm not going to do is put a jacket on Mark Breland or start to make accusations along with you without proof. A photo online of a glove that has indentation when there's horsehair in there and part padding, that's not the answer. You know, JD is the one that went into the locker room with Tyson Fury. He watched the wraps get put on.
Right.
He watched Tyson Fury put the gloves on. The commission, everybody agreed that, hey, everything is good. We'll sign off on it. So the excuses just don't line up, and that's what concerns me and would concern me if I'm in the corner of Deontay Wilder, is that, okay, we're saying all these things, but it's not amounting to much.
Well, it's not amounting to anything at all, is what the problem is. And here's the thing. I mean, my brothers are there leaving these comments on Twitter and on YouTube channels. And I remember back when I first started doing this YouTube thing, a few people were going at my guys G-Funky and D-Style, essentially calling them racist because they weren't co-signing this. You know, the interesting thing to me is that they have no problems. None. Zero. Nothing. With JD's keeping his job, the white man, the boss, the guy whose job it was to actually go in there and inspect the gloves. Now, if what we're all saying is true, or not what I'm saying, but what the narrative that's being laid out there is true, and it's white privilege that got Deontay Wilder to lose and was the resulting effect in terms of had the resulting effect, rather, of Mark Breland spiking the water. Well, why doesn't that apply to JD's? How does he walk away clean from this? You see, when that happens, you really start to realize that they don't actually believe the shit that they're saying. And one thing that I do give Andre Ward credit for is that he's been saying this stuff for a while now. This ain't nothing new. He's been on this, going at the excuse making essentially since February 2020 is when it first started. And if you don't believe me, have a listen to this. This is back from February 2020. He was being interviewed by Max Kellerman.
Why? I mean, he's got to grab something, right? I just don't think that was the right thing to grab. And I heard somebody say that this is probably a good time for Wilder to fall back, go on vacation, just take time to think and process and not do interviews, because he may say things now that later down the road he regrets. You're right. It wasn't the 40-pound suit that he had on coming to the ring. That may have been a reason why his legs weren't there, but it wasn't the reason. I think it was the 273 pounds of flesh that Tyson Fury had on him that wore Deontay down, as well as the punches and everything else he had to deal with. This is the thing: when you train hard and you're in tip-top shape, you push yourself every day to exhaustion, and then you teach yourself to recover. Like if you're in tip-top shape, I'm talking like heavyweight, biggest fight of my life type of shape. I've trained like a Spartan for 10 weeks. You push yourself to a point every day, and then your body learns to recover. So in between rounds, after 30 and 45 seconds, you should be able to get off that stool, no matter how hard the previous round was, and go out there and do what you have to do. The suit may have affected him to a degree, but it should not have affected him or had an outcome on the fight, and I just don't think that that's accurate.
Okay. So there you go. That was when the excuse was just the suit. Andre Ward was calling bullshit on that. That was before the egg weights, before the glove placement, before the water being spiked. Andre Ward's a real one, man. You got to give the brother credit, all right? That's regardless of what color you are. He sees the reality. He speaks his mind. He presents a series of facts, and he defends it. And when your only response to that is, oh, that brother's a coon, or that, I'm not going to say the word, but that N-word's a coon N-word, and he's, buck dancing and juking and jiving for the white man. No, he's not. No, he's not. Yeah, what he is he's actually defending black people, because you know what's really cooning? What's really cooning to me, and I showed the video earlier of what a coon is. It's all the negative stereotypes, the wide-eyed, super ignorant, muscle-bound but very small-minded black person living up to that stereotype for the white man. Well, tell me that that's not what Deontay Wilder's doing. Tell me that he doesn't come off as anything far from intelligent when he's making all of these, or actually not making the claims, or co-signing the claims and then running with it. Is that not stereotypical? Could he not be cast as the ignorant black man in any Hollywood movie doing what the fuck he's doing right now? Think about it. Closing credits of any Hollywood movie from the 70s or 80s when there were all kind of black people doing all kind of stereotypical bullshit. Is that not Deontay Wilder right now with what he's doing? Come on, bro. Come on. You really got to come stronger than calling people like him and like me coons. Now, look, that was Andre Ward when it was just the excuse of the suit. Flash forward a year to this year, February. Yeah, he had a lot more to say. Let's check it out right now.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, it's unfortunate. You hate to see a team like that and a group like that that's, been through the lean years and the tough times, make it to the mountaintop for a long time, and then have this kind of falling out after a loss. But Max, these kind of things, happen all the time after a loss, especially a bad loss, especially when a prize fighter takes his first loss. Somebody has to be the blame. And I've spoken out about this, since February, since, Deontay Wilder and Tyson Fury fought, that ultimately somebody was going to have to take the blame. Didn't know it was going to be Mark Breland, but that we were going to see this kind of behavior from Deontay Wilder, because you've seen a guy who's been built up as being invincible. And you know how it is in the sport of boxing. Punchers have a delicate psyche sometimes. And when that punch doesn't work, and then in turn they get knocked out, things are shattered, things fall apart. And unfortunately, Mark Breland, who I believe is a great coach, but an even better person, is getting thrown under the bus. I don't agree with it. There's a time and a place to take the high road and let people talk and not answer. And then there's a time to stand up for yourself and push back. And I'm glad Mark Breland is speaking out.
Deontay Wilder's clearly going.
And there you go. So again, black man speaking the truth, black man standing up for what's right, black man talking about what he sees is going on, and, making a very concrete, evidence-based, logical argument about the fact that Deontay Wilder cannot take a loss. And guess what, guys? It has nothing to do with white privilege. It doesn't. Now, look, if I go out for a job and I got all these graduate degrees and I speak all these different languages, and they give the job to a guy that doesn't have anywhere near the qualifications I have, yeah, that's white privilege. If we're talking about these blue blood people that came over on the Mayflower and still have all of this generational wealth, while a lot of black people are still dealing with systemic poverty and discrimination that is the result of the fact that even since their emancipation, in quotes, from slavery, they're still dealing with challenges. Okay, then we have something to talk about. But don't bring that shit to boxing. Don't bring that shit to a heavyweight title fight fought between two men that signed up for combat, that each put on a pair of gloves and went to battle, and one of them ended up losing, and the one that ended up losing was black, and the one that ended up winning was white. You miss me with that. You miss me. You miss Andre Ward. You miss Tim Bradley. You miss H Money. You miss the real ones that stand up for what's right and that speak against what's wrong. You just do. I'm all for conversations about white privilege, but it's got to be the right white person in the right context. It's got to be the 1%. It's got to be the boss man. Guess what? Shelly Finkel's a boss. JD's is a boss. I didn't hear anybody talking about white privilege as it relates to them. But yet we get to talk about Mark Breland spiking water. The fucking employee of the former heavyweight champion of the world. You're blaming the black employee of the black boss and blaming what happened to the black boss on white privilege. Really? And then you're calling us coons because we have the audacity to speak out against it. Nah. It's time for that to stop. If we want people to really respect the battles that we are dealing with as people of color, whether you are a descendant of a slave, whether you are a descendant of indigenous people that had their lands stolen from them and had to immigrate here from south of the border, or are struggling still here on native reservations, All of those very valid struggles and oppression that is terrible that these people are facing and have faced historically gets diluted anytime you bring that shit to a boxing match that was very fairly judged and refereed. In fact, I could actually make the argument that there were a couple knockdowns that Tyson Fury didn't get credit for in that fight. I felt that Tyson Fury had about a couple knockdowns that he didn't get credit for in that fight. So look, nobody's buck dancing. Nobody's a coon. Nobody's a coon N-word. Nobody's got the eyeballs out there serving the interests of the massa. Nobody's doing that. We're speaking facts. We're talking about boxing. So let's keep it boxing. Let's work on building class solidarity between the 99%. The 99% of us that got to wake up every morning and bust our ass to get paid every other Friday, to give our labor over to the dominant one that controls it and doesn't pay us what we're worth. That's the real struggle. The fact that a lot of us don't have the housing we need, the healthcare we need, the job opportunities we need, the access to loans and grants and, water and roads and public transportation and nice libraries and organic food in our neighborhood. That's actually the struggle. Not blaming the loss of a millionaire heavyweight champion that employs people, including black people, and blaming that loss on white privilege when there is no evidence to back up any of these claims. None whatsoever. All right, so let's work to switch the narrative here. All right, let's work to build bridges, all right, which is something that I got to give credit to my brothers at HCP are doing. All right, they may be of Mexican descent, Mexican Americans, but they welcome everybody into the pack. Regardless of what language your people speak or what skin tone you are, that's what they're about. And that's why we're building the best network that is out there right now in boxing, because we don't subscribe to this stuff. You could be of indigenous descent. You could be of Asian descent. You could be of African descent. You could be of European descent. You could be of all these descents mixed up. As long as you're a boxing fan and you keep it real, you're welcome with G Funky. You're welcome with me. You're welcome with D Style. You're welcome with brothers like Joe Habib, who's Arab. All right. You know what? Because we're all working class people. We're all getting up every morning to sell our labor, to bust our asses, to put money in our bank accounts and food on our table and keep a fucking roof over the head. And that's the struggle that most of us are facing. And anytime people blame what happened to Deontay Wilder on racism and white privilege, all you do is take a big, enormous shit on the legacies of Malcolm X, the legacies of Martin Luther King Jr., the legacies of Mandela, okay, the legacies of all of the innocent black people, including right here in New York City, that have died in hails of bullets and in chokeholds and in all kinds of stuff at the hands of a repressive, racist system that we live in. So focus that energy on that. Don't focus your energy on a working class, a white dude or whatever color he is that thinks that Tyson Fury won the fight. That's displaced energy, bro. Because guess what? This entire time that he's been feeling sorry for himself and his fans have been feeling sorry for him, have they really been talking about the actual systemic repression and discrimination in this country? The lives being lost, the innocent lives? The people getting shot by the police, fathers, brothers, sons, uncles dying at the hands of a repressive system. They have not, because they only care about this fight and presenting it as the result of some kind of terrible act of racism. And it's just is not what it is, yo. That just is not what it is. So I'm going to leave it at that. All right. I want to big up D-Style. The elites absolutely divide us. G Funky. ATP is the home of real boxing talk. And my brother, No Pow, over there, and everybody else that tuned in. Hit the like button, hit the notification button, like, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff, fellas and sisters. Very happy to have all of you on live with me. And that is it. I am out.